All right. Hi, students. Welcome back to Soch 275. Today, we have a really special guest for you. Some of you might already know her, Dr. Bernd from the biology department here at Davidson. She is an expert in biology, and she actually knows a ton of stuff about cell biology. And, since we're dealing with issues of vaccines and cells and disease, I thought it would be nice if she would come and speak with us, and she's been very kind to be here today. Welcome, Karen, Dr. Bernd. So did you want to add anything before I ask you questions?
No, that's fine. Let's just dive right in.
Okay, wonderful. So first thing I wanted to ask you are, since this is a media and society course, as I've mentioned, what are some discrepancies you notice as an expert in cell biology, right? What discrepancies have you noticed between the research relating to COVID-19 as it comes out versus the media reporting?
So one of the things that has struck me the most since COVID started, which I've never been able to say that before, since this started, is that it has really driven home to me the way the media is driven by clickbait. And so everything needs to be a headline. Everything needs to grab people's attention. And so the way that science works, let me turn that off. The way that science works is we're slow. We gather information and we test hypotheses. And one of the things that people in the media and in the world in general, I think, forget is that what a hypothesis is it's based on the information you have, but what's critical about a hypothesis is that it's testable and falsifiable. And so when we get data that support a hypothesis, that's one small step. And if we're starting with a brand new disease, right, and this is where I use sports analogies all the time, which is kind of funny because I am not a sports person, but I'm going to use a sports analogy anyway. So if you were just learning how to play baseball, if you're just learning how, if you're, one of those 5-year-old kids playing pee-wee baseball, they put the ball on a post. They don't toss it to you. They put it on a post and you hit the ball from there. And when you're first starting in a brand new area of research, it's like the ball on the post. You have to start from something that's standing in one place and that you can hit. Now, just because that 5-year-old can hit that T-ball does not mean that they can hit a major league fastball. Right? It's not the same thing. You have to build up to it. You have to have more information. And so the thing that has struck me the most is that every time there is an incremental piece of information, it gets blown up as though that is the end and the answer. And the problem is then we get more information, and as scientists, what we are really used to doing is revising that hypothesis. But the media just grabs onto it and says, oh, they were wrong. And I really think that that is where the disconnect over the wearing of masks has come in. Right? So at the very beginning, in the United States, Dr. Fauci, who we all watched, would say, don't wear masks. All right. And one of the reasons that it got projected of don't wear masks was not that masks don't work, but that we didn't have enough of them. But the media grabbed onto the don't wear, and because we don't have enough of them kind of went to the wayside. And so as more information came out and the evidence began to support, well, we have them now, we have upped production. I mean, this one I got from Hanes, that's not an ad, but I got this from a major t-shirt producing company. And they didn't make these before January of this year. They had no reason to, but we upped production, and so now it is much more available. And we've got the possibility for not just those people who are on the front line to wear masks. Everybody can wear them. And then what was also confusing is we're wearing these masks for other people, right? We're keeping us from spreading something that we don't know if we have. We might be asymptomatic. We have to do this from a community standpoint. And the media, and I think, again, in general, the public, we're much more better. We are much better at doing things for ourselves. What will protect me rather than what will protect my next door neighbor or the guy that I pass in the grocery store. Sometimes altruism is not our strong suit. And so having that, well, first they say that we shouldn't wear them, and now they're saying that we aren't wearing them for ourselves, we're wearing them from other people, and having that sensationalized headline perspective really got in the way of some of the science coming forward as easily as it might have.
The media really sort of obscured what people should be doing in response to the pandemic because they were really focused on sensational new things.
Yes. Well, and we're living in a sensational time. All right? We are living in a time where things are happening that have not happened in our lifetime. And the last time that there was a pandemic like this, back in 1918, people didn't have televisions, let alone having the internet.
Right.
And so the fact that everyone has access to these little incremental steps of science and sees how messy it is, when you've been taught all your life that this textbook went from chapter 1 to chapter 2 and that's how they figured things out, that's not how they figured things out. So, you know, the world is getting to see that science really does move forward, but it moves forward by collecting things from different sides. And that's hard when people are trying to respond in real time to something that they're afraid of. And that's the thing on top of this. You know, if we were talking about fashion, you know, some fad in fashion, we might have media reporting on some, you know, goofy trend that just started, but people wouldn't be afraid for their lives potentially.
Right.
And so that adds in this extra fact where, you know, sure, you could have a big headline about whether or not neon colors are in. All right, but people can say, well, I don't care. I don't like neon colors, and that's no big deal. But it doesn't affect their actual life or the lives of people that they love.
The stakes are very high right now.
They are.
They're as high as they can go. So I guess you touched on that with the masks a little bit, but if there's anything else, what are some common misconceptions about the pandemic that you've seen perpetuated in the media because they misunderstood the science?
Masks, the fact, so if you look behind me and, you know, like right here, so my area of research is the effect of water pipe tobacco smoke on lung cells. And so I live in the world of aerosols and people inhaling aerosols, which in that regards puts me in a great position to understand and talk about what's happening here. You know, and I will have people say, okay, you've got a hookah pipe there. Should I be smoking a hookah pipe? My kind of bottom line answer to that is breathing in smoke is probably not going to be good for your health. But as a scientist, but it's a lifestyle choice. And if you choose to do it, my area of research is to see which ways are safer. Are there ways that cause less harm, that mitigate harm? Are all of them bad or as bad? When we're talking about the science that's coming out around masks. All right, so there are some great videos out there. Go look at them about what happens when people speak. It has really made me exceedingly self-conscious to think about how much spit is now on my computer because I am sitting this close to it. That you don't even think about these microscopic aerosols that you are exhaling. And so there have been things like that where with masks, do they stop it or don't they stop it? Well, the argument that I have heard is that, well, we need to be wary of masks because we are going to get carbon dioxide poisoning, right? Because I can't breathe and I'm rebreathing carbon dioxide if I'm wearing my masks. But the mask doesn't stop the virus. All right, well, there's a misconception of science. Carbon dioxide is a carbon molecule and two oxygens, right? Carbon dioxide, right? Very small molecule. If anything's gonna get through this, it's gonna be something that's 3 atoms big, right? A virus is a viral particle. It is covered with proteins that have thousands of atoms in them. So on a relative scale, going from a gas like carbon dioxide to a virus that could be, it's still going to be tiny, but we're talking nanometers in diameter rather than way smaller than nanometers in diameter. So there's been the misconception in the media, depending on which media you look at, that a mask can stop a gas, but can't stop a virus. All right, they're orders of magnitude different in size. So either it's stopping both of them, or, well, not that it's stopping neither of them because it works like a filter. And again, you've got virus, an aerosol is actually the viral particles carried in liquid because you've got saliva in your mouth that it's coming out in. And if you've worn a mask, you know that they get kind of damp on the inside. And that's because you're breathing out the humidity, little bits of spit, that are carrying the virus. And so I think that has been one of the most potentially harmful misconceptions, is that you would somehow be harming yourself by not getting enough oxygen or not getting rid of enough carbon dioxide. And yet at the same time, this thing won't stop a virus that is way larger than that. And so there's that part. And there's people talking about being infected by their mask. Well, if you're being infected by your mask, that means you had it to begin with because you breathed it into the mask. So while this may sound kind of snarky, at least you didn't spread it to somebody else. I mean, keep the virus to yourself, quarantine, get tested, get better, all right? That's good. So that sort of thing. There has been more than out and out misinformation. What has somewhat amazed and really bothered me is just the distrust of science that has come across in different areas of the media. Not all of the media, but in different areas at different times. And if I'm gonna, be an armchair psychoanalyst, my guess is some of it's out of fear and some of it's out of ratings. And some of it's, we have come into a society where we have to say both sides, the both siderism of the media, where as a scientist, like, carbon dioxide is smaller than a virus. There is no other side. All right, you measure them, it's a fact. Yeah. And so trying to say that you have to let someone else's information come out as the other side, I have a difficulty with that when it's something that you can measure and it's a fact.
Yeah, and that's a general issue that we do talk about in this class, about facts versus narratives, like right. Science deals with facts and media deals with narratives, and when you put these things
when they come together. Well, and I think that this is a particularly critical time for that sort of critical thinking skill, because we're watching science figure out what the facts are.
Yeah.
And so the messiness of, okay, if we add in this information that, you know, at first they were saying kids couldn't get it at all right, way back when, because they didn't see any cases.
Right.
Well, now we're seeing that it's a very small percentage, but kids are getting cases, and more similar to adult percentages, the percent of children, if they test positive, that show serious symptoms is similar to that in adults. All right, the difference is the absolute number.
Yeah.
So if I have to make up numbers here, don't quote me on these numbers. Okay. So if it were that out of every 100 adults, 80% of them are susceptible to getting COVID. All right, so now we're down to 80 out of 100. And out of that 80%, 1% will show severe symptoms. That's 8 people, right? Yeah, that would be 10%. One person, it's less than a percent. You're right. So one person. So these are obviously made up. This is a made up virus with made up numbers.
Yeah.
Disclaimers all over. All right. So now if we talk about this with kids, what if out of every 100 kids, only 50% of them are susceptible to actually carrying the virus? And what if out of that 50, only 0.1% will show symptoms, right? Even if we're using same percentages, we end up with a much smaller absolute number because we started with a different number. And so that's something where within the media, we will sometimes hear just the percentages and not know what number it's comparing to. Yeah. So if I talk about, I'm not going to be able to come up with real data off the top of my head. But so if I talk about hair color, all right, it being if you have brown hair, you are 50% more likely to have brown eyes. All right, I'm making this up again. Right, so you're 50%, you have a 50% higher chance than someone who has blonde hair of having brown eyes. Right, but what percentage, what chance was there of the person with blonde hair? Right, if there was a 1% chance, no, I got to make the numbers easier. If there was a 2% chance of a person with blonde hair having brown eyes, and you increase that by 50%, that's still only a 3% chance, which is much different than if there's a 50% chance, you increase that by 50%, you're up to 75%. Yeah. So the actual risk, there isn't a risk of having brown eyes, had them all my life. All right, so if we're talking about disease, the actual risk can get masked by using these percentage numbers and not knowing what the baseline of comparison is actually talking about.
Very good point. So they're just like throwing numbers, but the precision of the information that these numbers are providing.
Mm-hmm. Like I just did. I just made a whole bunch up.
In a helpful way that helps us understand.
That's right. That's right. You know?
Yeah, no. That's
and 80% of statistics are made up.
Wow, I should definitely not post this in my statistics class, but maybe I will because we have.
That's a meme. It's okay. They've seen that one before.
No, actually, I might actually make my stats specific now. Let's see.
Oh, I've got some great graphs for you for your stats class.
Please send them along.
I've been collecting them for how different states have been representing data and changing graphs, but we're off topic.
We would love that. All right, so now the second half of this is going to be focused on social media, right? Right now we were talking broadly about media and really mostly about top-down models of media where they're, synthesizing complicated information into sound bites and clickbait. But now I'm thinking about social media, and not just social media like people find news on Twitter or Reddit, social media where people engage with news on Twitter and Reddit and then become a part of this like news production, media production engine. First, tell me how do people engage with conversations about the pandemic on social media from your perspective? And what kind of information do people share, and how often do you see people sharing facts versus narratives versus fears?
All right, so I'm a woman of a certain age. All right, so I only use certain types of social media. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, right? And I have 42 first cousins. So, yes, I have one brother and I have 42 first cousins. And what that means in a Facebook world is that I have relatives and friends across a spectrum, a wide spectrum of backgrounds, of parts of the world, of what they do for a living, of religions, of, yeah, you name it. I think I'm related to somebody.
Yes.
It probably is it or does it. And a lot of us are on Facebook. And so what I have seen is a lot of things posted that are going for those sound bites, that are going for the sensationalized, you're being sheeple and you're just following, which is interesting because whatever edge of a spectrum you are on, if you're just following that edge, guess what? You're a sheep. So we can all be sheep with whatever our group is.
Yep.
This depends on what your reference group is.
Yep.
And so having, shall we say, the conversation. So one of the things of being able to have that many people who will at least tolerate what I say and not unfollow me because we're related, even if they don't agree with me. Mm-hmm. I've had some interesting conversations. I'm mostly on academic Twitter, so the conversations there are pretty one-sided. I'm in my bubble on Twitter. Yeah. But on Facebook, I hear things from all over, from everything, that you should be taking silver extracts to protect yourself and increase your immunity. Please don't. They will actually make your skin tinge blue. Oh. And unless you want to be, what was the movie? Avatar? Yeah, unless you want to do that, you don't want to turn blue. And so, I have friends and relatives across the spectrum there, and there really is a divide in people, myself included, being assured of our correctness. Now, I like to be assured of my correctness because I'm right. But let me put it that way. But what I have also learned is that through this and through some other political conversations that I have had with friends and relatives is that they have made me check my facts. If I hear something or I see something on the news, memes I'm a little leery of anyway because it's a meme, right? But if I see something that is coming across as a news report, I go back and try to find out where it came from. If someone is saying that something is mandated, by some edge of the government, or by some person is going to restrict this, or they're going to allow that, or they're going to fund something, I go back and try to find the actual documents, whether it's going to one of the .gov sort of sites. And in that way, having that larger bubble of influence within my own social media has made me be good about that, rather than just assuming that the things that I'm consuming are correct. Now, when it comes to the science aspect, I've been doing this a long time. For the people in your class, and actually for you, I've been doing it longer than you've been alive, all right? So I have a certain amount of expertise that comes with the ability to read the scientific literature. Right? I am not an immunologist. Immunology is incredibly complex. And one of the things that immunologists will tell you is that it's incredibly complex. But I know enough about cell and molecular biology, through my own research about things that have to do with the respiratory tract, that I can also read the information that is coming out at the cellular level and have a good sense of whether or not I trust the information. And that's something that social media is not always very good at. And that headlines, whether they are something that, you know, my aunt grabbed off of something and put up on social media, or that went across on the chyron on the bottom of the news, those are often things that are meant to grab you emotionally, and that may not take into account things that scientists hold dear, which are things like sample size and reproducibility and all the things that I know you teach in your statistics class, which this isn't. But, you know, the fact that if you are getting information from a sample size of 10, it has a certain amount of value. All right. You know, if you polled 10 people in your class, you would get an idea of what was going on campus. All right. But if you polled 2,000 people, everybody on campus, you would have a much better idea of what was going on campus. The same thing happens when we're talking at a cellular level, when we're talking about how drugs work, when we're talking about how an intervention, so an intervention, whether it's wearing a mask or taking a particular type of medication, I mean, any of those sorts of things, the size of the sample makes a difference. Yeah. And in addition, when we're talking about things like drugs and vaccines, one of the big problems is that in order to know that if they're effective and safe, we just need time. We need longitudinal data. And we have a disease that started, what month is it? You know, it's 8 months old. And longitudinal data is usually like 5 to 7 years of data. There's an article that just came out that has been, actually I should have started with this, sorry, we'll go back, that has just came out about the COVID vaccine. So there's a COVID vaccine that's in the running that has been tested, and we're testing it for efficacy. And one of the things that it came out was that it was effective for at least 3 months. All right, that people who got this vaccine in this very small sample size, it seemed to show effectiveness for at least 3 months. The media reported it, right? That's what was reported on the CDC. The media reported it as it is effective for only 3 months. Right? There's a big difference there. Yeah. And the big difference is because no one had that vaccine more than 3 months ago. We can't know how long it lasts if it didn't exist. And you know, something that might be a good comparative example for you youngsters is, so back when I was a child, my mother vaccinated me against chickenpox by putting me in the room with my brother who had chickenpox. All right, that was what families would do. I got a mild case of chickenpox at the age of 5. It's better to get it early than to get it late. There was no vaccine. All right, years go by. My husband's younger brother, all right, so not too many years go by, but about 5 go by, there was a chickenpox vaccine for him, available for him when he was a child. His mother wasn't sure if he should get it because they said they only knew that it would last 5 years because it had only been around 5 years. All right, now we know that it can last for, how old is he now? So it can last for, I mean, we have data that shows that the immunity can last for 30 years. Why do we know? Because the vaccine has been around for 30 years. And so having that, how you interpret the information that you are given, that the CDC put out absolutely correct information. This particular vaccine in these very small set trials, we're still working on it, it's not available, will last at least 3 months. but that got turned into only.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a big difference.
Yeah. It seems like it would be a small difference, but it's all the difference because then you're literally misreporting the science and you are obscuring the truth, which is the
Mm-hmm.
problem, right? The problem.
Well, and something that I had shared with you, I shared with you a podcast
Yeah.
of someone who was going through a particular line of reasoning. And one of the things that he was talking about in that is that the problem is you have a news report that then reports on a news report that then reports on a news report. And so the at least gets lost, and the only, as reported by AP, gets reported by ABC as only, gets reported by Fox as only, gets reported by NBC as only, and becomes the reality when it isn't what was said in the first place.
Yeah, I teach my students about a concept of hyper-reality. It's this idea that there is consensus truth backed at one level, and then what people understand about that reality through the filtration of the media that we then conform and modify our own versions of reality to then understand this false reality as reality, and that's like hyper-reality is the concept that we just.
Well, and in that same regards, if you're talking about people, just the way the news is delivered to you,
Yeah.
right? Again,
Yeah.
I'm older than you guys. I remember Walter Cronkite, right? Walter Cronkite was this older white man with white hair and a mustache, if I remember correctly, who would tell you the news the way it was. And he gave you the news like this. And he never sounded overly emotional. The one time he got emotional, and I'm not this old, was when he reported that Kennedy got shot. That was when he broke up on TV. And that's like the only time anybody remembers him ever kind of not being this calming force on television news. Where now we have basically what my grandmother would have called a coffee clutch of people sitting around a table and getting emotional about the news. And so the emotion is what stays rather than even what the information is.
No, that's exactly right. And that's what we're trying to learn.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I'm not talking necessarily about, you know, the pandemic. I'm talking about the morning news shows where everybody sits around with a cup of coffee and they're just chatting about the day, you know. But it isn't information, it's that you're joining somebody for coffee.
yeah, it's editorializing, right?
Yeah.
There's
Mhm.
information, you're just chit-chatting about it, and now that we have 24 hours news cycle, someone's always editorializing.
Because how else do you fill the void? I mean, the 24-hour news cycle is exhausting.
Yeah. I mean, how else do you fill the void? So that leads me to my final question for you, and just tell me what you think about this. This is an experimental assignment we're trying to do in this class, where we are trying to collectively create the students together with myself, like as a document that talks about like new norms for internet citizenship and participation. So how
Could
can
you
we?
say that again? Sorry.
We're trying to create like new norms for internet citizenship and participation. So how can we engage with social media more mindfully and in ways that are healing and helpful for everybody rather than sort of perpetuating continual mass hysteria, and a bunch of other stuff. So in relation to just like with COVID, there's so much anxiety being transferred through the internet, be transferred to one another. What do you suggest to our students and broadly anybody else as they brainstorm, healthy engagement with mindful engagement with social media regarding the COVID-19 pandemic? What are some of your suggestions? What are things we can do to make it a better place and more honest and true?
So I think that it's mindful engagement with media about any topic. And so what I had said that, you know, my relatives on Facebook have kind of caused me to do, both so that I am, you know, sometimes that I make sure that it is not, I'm not questioning my own sanity and my own interpretation of things, but it's checking sources. And all right, so you can't be an expert in everything, but you can have the electronic literacy to know what sites are good to check things for. So when you're talking about something like the pandemic, the CDC website, the Johns Hopkins website, and for students, you're like, okay, what websites should I use? And if you're not sure, one of the great things about being at Davidson is you've got access to all of us, and you get in touch with us and you say, hey, what website should I be looking at? And we'll say, well, this one's really good.
Yeah.
And that one maybe not so much. And you can send that email to someone in any topic, you know, that you are interested in or that you're hearing about. You know, could you point me in a direction of good resources on topic X? So there's that part. And in the sense of the pandemic itself, my interpretation of a lot of this, I am confused, I guess, by some of the forms of outrage that have been expressed on social media in particular, against what would seem to be, right, and I'm being very judgmental here, would seem to be common sense. I mean, so if we had really locked down early, we could be New Zealand, all right, where, you know, you can count the number of cases on two hands, and they had 0. And so I don't know where those 17 cases, all right, I don't have 17 fingers, hands and toes. But so that, you know, they really locked down, like Taiwan. Taiwan has done an amazing job about controlling the virus. And some of it is thinking as a community rather than as an individual. And in this particular situation, because we're talking about a transmittable, communicable disease, right? On other things, rugged individualism will get you places. In this case, if you're going to be the rugged individual, hopefully you're doing it somewhere where you are isolated, because that's where you will be safe, being a rugged individual and not potentially harming others. The thing is, we live as a community, just like, you know, I say, every cell in your body, it can't live without the other cells. We are all part of a larger community. We're all part of a country. And in this particular sense, we've taken something that is biological and health related and made it political or some sort of a weird moral statement about whether or not, you know, you should be able to do this or to do that, where if we are all in this together, we can get through it without the panic. We can get through it with the, okay, I wear a mask because it helps all of us. And because it helps all of us, yeah, I'm inconvenienced a little bit. But then maybe, you know, it's August now, maybe in October, it's gone, or it's very manageable. And so it is some, in this particular instance, I think it is some of us seeing beyond our own. It's weird. We need to isolate. We have all these pods, these social pods that we are part of, where we have isolated ourselves from other people. But within those, we need to be thinking about protecting everybody else. And so when we're thinking about that and talking about it with people on social media, it is also understanding that a lot of the responses that are coming out are out of fear. Fear, it could be, you know, health fear. It could also be economic fear. It could be isolation fear. You know, there are all sorts of things that people are going through because of this particular pandemic, and the fact that we have this invisible enemy.
Yeah.
Visible enemies you can watch for, invisible enemies you can't because they're invisible. But so being mindful of that, not just as you take in social media, but also the things that you put out. And I'm not talking about, you know, the big banner memes, but if somebody puts something out there, asking them questions that aren't accusing them, that aren't telling them that they're stupid, because nobody listens after you tell them they're stupid. It's, you know, why do you think that? Or have you thought about this? Or that's a good point. I've heard about this, maybe we can find out more. You know, that sort of thing where we stop fighting against each other and talk to each other.
Yep. That's, thank
Does
you
that work?
so much. That's
Did
amazing.
I do good?
No, that's amazing. I mean, that's really goes to the heart of a lot of the things that I was hoping that our class would collectively discover, this need for kindness.
Look, I helped.
No, you were amazing. This will be so valuable, and so hopefully to the class and beyond, to the broader community and the world. Thank you so much. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up today? This was so wonderful.
So within the Davidson community, because you've said you're going to make this a little wider known, within the Davidson community, you know how to get in touch.
Yeah.
You can feel free to reach out. I am obviously happy to talk with people. I will tell you that I am pretty good at knowing where the ends of my information are. And I am not an expert on COVID. I just have years of experience with science. And you know, I know the information that I have access to now, and I can help other people to navigate that, especially the people in your class.
Thank you. Yeah, students. So if you're interested in talking to Dr. Bernd, I can send you her email on Moodle, or you can just reach out to me and then I'll connect you, or you can reach out to her directly, which thank you so much for offering that.
Sure, you're welcome.
It'll be very valuable. So thank you. This was really awesome, Karen. We really, really appreciate your expert voice, and I look forward to sharing this with my class. I'm going to
Great.
stop recording now. All right.